scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut up the kingdom of heaven. For you neither go in yourselves, neither suffer ye them that are entering to go in. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye devour widows' houses for a pretense, make long prayer. Therefore ye shall receive the greater damnation. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you compass land and sea to make one.
Good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. My name is Paul Strangini. I don't know why I said that. I never said that. All right. Well, because it's in the title. All right. So we left off with Jesus talking about the light of the light of the body, and we understood it in terms of take heed how you see things. The way you see things affects your whole life, essentially. It fills the whole body. It's sort of like, I didn't think of that in terms of the symbology of the body. We have like the body of Christ, and when people do things like someone's an author, what do they say? They talk about the body of their work. I mean, it's the whole of something. And when he's talking about the light filling your body in this case, I think it's your whole life. And when he talks about the whole being full of light, like we talked about, and I'm sort of like trying to characterize if your whole body is full of light, and they're having no part dark, the whole shall be full of light. The whole what? The whole of your entire life. As the bright shining of a candle doth give thee light. And as he spake, a certain Pharisee besought him to dine with him. And he went in and sat down to meat. So this is kind of a connection. As he spake, listening like this is, maybe he kind of gets it. I don't know. I don't know if he kind of gets it, because honestly, for years, I think I tended to think of that more in terms of, I don't think I thought of it the way I don't know if I've ever even taught it the way I just taught it. You know what I mean? It shows you how long you can be familiar with something and think you understand it and not understand it. That's the thing, is like a lot of times we think we understand, but we don't we? I don't remember what I used to understand or how I explain it differently. I know I took a slightly different angle. I didn't get that specific, but I think I had the same general idea. I don't think I ever really took it in terms of the eyes to see angle. But I think that is the most, at least in this context, the most clear meaning. Anyways, so the Pharisee asks him to come dine with him, and Jesus agrees. And when the Pharisee, and when the Pharisee saw it, he marveled that he had not first washed before dinner. See, he went in and sat down to eat. Meat means, it's the, a lot of times they use the word meat, and it's a idiom that refers to all kinds of food. Like to sit down to meat means to get down to the business of eating. So he just walks in and sits down and starts eating. When the Pharisee saw it, he marveled that he had not first washed before dinner. All right, and before we go on with that, let's just make this clear. Now, I've been told for years, and I assume it's true, because everyone says so. But it's not referring to the simple, like, he didn't wash his hands. All right? They weren't that cleanly in terms of, like, well, one, nobody understood about germs anyways. So, like, the idea of, like they washed and it was good, but they didn't know why. You know what I mean? Well, they had different reasons why than we might wash, right? We might think, like, well, I've just been dinging around in the dirt outside. And so we have no reason to assume Jesus is in any way dirty. I mean, do you wash every time you eat? I've eaten out where I just, drive up to the drive-in, right? Get the food and you eat it. You don't always wash your hands. I mean, even in this modern age, nobody washes their hands every time, especially if you think they're generally clean. You know what I mean? If you haven't done anything particularly dirty with them, if you haven't touched any, I mean, if you've ever been at home all day working at your computer, and it's only your own germs here. Yeah, in fact, I usually wash my hands after I eat because they get messy. You know what I mean? It was sometimes my wife likes to put a lot of vegetables on the burgers, and they fall off and it gets all sloppy. It's delicious, but it's sloppy, and my hands get all dirty. I keep my own napkin right here because I'll take lunch at my desk. So it's not that it was like a dirty thing, in the sense we would think of it, like, oh, he had dirty his hands. He'd just been out doing carpentry, and he came in and ate without washing his hands. That's not the point. It's just that no matter what, they washed their hands. It was a tradition of the Pharisees, and it had to do with ceremonial washing. It was a ceremonial washing to cleanse from uncleanness. Because when you're out in the world, you don't know what kind of uncleanness you might have come near. You might have touched something a Gentile touched. I mean, if you touch something someone else touched, you might need to wash your hands. We know that, but that's not what they were thinking. They weren't thinking, when they thought of Gentile germs, they were thinking of something entirely different than what we would think. It wasn't about, like I said, about any sort of idea of, disease or anything like that. There was no pragmatic thought behind it. It was all about holiness, cleanliness in the sight of God. And so to him, for this man who he probably is thinking, he's not utterly hostile. He asks him to dine in his house, and he's not totally hostile towards him. He's thinking, this man has something to say, and he's performing miracles, and so he's giving Jesus an honorable reception. But then he just can't believe he didn't wash his hands. He doesn't do the thing we do, which in their sight is just the right thing to do. Something so basic as to cleanse yourself before eating. You know what I mean? Has nothing to do with being dirty. You know what I mean? If Jesus had been handling dung 5 minutes before that, he would have washed his hands. He didn't need to wash his hands. His hands weren't dirty. You know what I mean? Everyone washes their hands when they get dirty. If they're dirty, you don't want to eat sand in your sandwich, right? And neither did Jesus. But this was Jesus was ready to eat. He just comes in and sits down. He's like, let's eat. And he marveled, you're not going to use the sacred basin? I don't know the details of this. Like I said, I've always been told, they had this hand washing ritual they would go through. See, there's a lot of things like that. When I get into Lazarus and the rich man, and I talk about the traditions of the Pharisees concerning funerals and stuff, it's going to be based on what other scholars have dug up. Other scholars, not other than me. Don't regard me as a scholar. What scholars have dug up, it's just always, I feel icky saying that no matter how it comes out of my mouth. But what researchers, too, all the things is, I'm a scholar, I'm a researcher, it's not that they say that, but people who know a lot more than I do have researched these things, and they come up with information, and then I take some of it on, okay, that sounds right, and I don't know precisely where that information comes from, because it's like, I've heard it so many times and from so many sources, and they all cite some other more authoritative source. A lot of it comes from their own writings about themselves that date back, from what I understand, like translating their own texts. But I don't even know what those texts are. I know that some guy named Lightfoot did translations of Pharisee stuff. But I don't know what exactly, or it wasn't, or someone else wrote about the Pharisees. But I forgot who, I don't know who. So the provenance of it, I don't know. But I go with it. It's not a big deal. It's certainly not, he had dung all over his hands and Jesus came in and started scarfing down a sandwich. Because that's not what we're thinking here. And by the context, what he gets into later, it's obvious. It's like, this is not a mere question of dirt. There's a question of what kind of spiritual filth you've got on you. You might have gone near a Gentile or whatever, but there was some sort of ceremonial cleansing that they went through every time they ate. Whatever. Jesus did not perform this little ritual. And as far as I know, I don't think it's a question of the law. I'm by no means an expert in the Old Testament law. There were requirements for washing and stuff, but the requirements may refer to special times, special ceremonies, priestly activities. Everything had to be cleansed with water, having to do with the tabernacle and with the temple of God. When the priests would do certain duties, they'd cleanse themselves using water and stuff. But I think they had exported a lot of that from the temple service and brought it to the home. Well, if it's good for the priest, it's good for us. And this tradition of doing this washing became almost like something everybody who knows everybody who knows anything cleanses before they eat. I mean, it's the holy thing to do. And the Lord said unto him, How do you Pharisees make clean the outside of the cup and the platter, but your inward part is full of ravening and wickedness? That's a rough thing to say to the guy at the start of dinner. If that's the way dinner starts out, I wonder how the rest of the meal is going to go. So, first thing he says is like, he hits him with the guy doesn't even say anything, but he's like marveling in himself. He didn't wash. How can this man be the Messiah if he didn't wash? The Messiah is going to be a holy man. He's going to wash like we do. They're watching him for error, but not realizing that the things they're looking for are their own little pet, I don't want to say peeves because it's not really that. Their own little pet doctrines and pet practices that they've developed, that they hold to. That they think, well, that's so right, that they assume the Messiah must follow he would follow the same things. Because we're so right in our doctrine, our doctrines are so right and justified. Of course, it's the truth. You think about all the people up there, like on the internet, on YouTube, talking about having the truth, right? And they all are so confident they have it. I mean, not all. I mean, but many. There's a lot of people real confident, real boastful. Let me explain to you about God. Let me explain to you about the Trinity. Let me explain to you about prophecy. And some of the attitudes I've seen from people, it's like, whoa, it's like there's this great assumption. Not assumption, but it's like they really think it's not, like they don't realize that the thought that I'm right is also the thought that, of course, God would be with me. You become so caught up in your own rightness and your own righteousness that you assume God thinks the same way. I may think I'm right. And you may think you're right. That's fine. But we also have to know and admit the possibility of being wrong on some things. And some things we may. I'm really sure I'm right. Jesus died for your sins. But that's an easy one because all Christians believe in that in some capacity or the other. It means a lot of different things to different people. But on some level, we think, yeah, that's right. And we'd be shocked to find out otherwise. It would be like God isn't a Christian or something. That's that's what it'd be like. So, obviously we assume the God is a Christian God, of course. He's our God. The Pharisees had a Pharisee God. And they expected the Messiah to be a Pharisee Messiah. So he speaks to this practice of making clean the outside of the cup and the platter, but the inward is full of ravening and wickedness. And it's a very obvious meaning, the analogy here. Cleaning the outside, it looks real nice from the outside, but then you look inside the cup, and it's dirty. And what is it full of? He cuts right across the analogy into ravening and wickedness. What's ravening? I was thinking of like raving. Ravening, I think, is greed. Like I'm ravenous. You know what I mean? Like, I want to devour. Greed and wickedness. I'm pretty sure that's what it means, but we are going to pop over there. My stream is going. Okay, good. All right. Because the YouTube's new streaming thing, it's just, that's such a pain in the neck to get over here. Because I have to click the button and click 5 things after I start streaming. All right. Ravening. Let's see. I'll open a new window. Harpage. The act of plundering, plunder, spoil, robbery. Robbery fueled by greed. That's why it's translated. Oh, interesting. Harpage. It's related to that word harpazo, which rapture enthusiasts should be familiar with as the word caught up. Like caught up together with them in the clouds to meet them in the air, right? From 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. But anyways, harpage means like grasping. You know? Grasping. What can I get? What can I grab? What can I seize? So an idea of robbery easily comes from that. It implies so greedy, so desirous that you would do anything, even steal, to obtain what you desire. And which word are we using for wickedness? Let's be curious here, because there's several words translate wickedness in the New Testament. Not that I need it, but it's fun to know, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, because like I always say, from context, you can we know what wicked is, right? But what's the word in Greek? Which one is it? Is it poneros, kakia, poneria? Oh, I'm sorry, I left you on the other page. I already went back. There we go. Poneria. That's the word. Well, you can take my word from it. I clicked it from here. Poneria. We learned that as evil in the terms of an action, as far as in terms of the evil results coming from evil deeds, like things that are, I like the quick definition sometimes. Like iniquity, yeah, because everyone knows what iniquity is. I like the Strong's from poneros, depravity. Come on. Depravity? I guess maybe I'm thinking of depravity wrong. Especially malice or concretely plots, sins. It's translated iniquity and wickedness. It's evil as just breaking up and destroying that is what is good. And so that's a kind of a wicked thing, to break up and destroy that which is good. Evil as hurtful. But wrong button. I don't want to go there. No, don't cross the streams. Don't want to cross the streams. That's bad. I assume it's bad because I don't want to sacrifice any of my connection. Okay. I shouldn't look at the little red light at the bottom that says kilobytes a second, 0. All right, so wrong thing, Paul. Wrong. There we go. Get rid of that. Where's our text? Okay. Saying outwardly you've got this clean exterior, but inwardly I see the sins. Because the sins are inside. The wickedness comes from within. Like the wickedness, the problem with me is not, I mean, in the Old Testament they had cleanliness laws, right? But you can become so focused on the outward that you neglect the inward. That's how Jesus, when he talked about, from the Sermon on the Mount, that's why he talked about adultery in terms of lust. He talked about murder in terms of hate. The underlying sinful impulses are internal, and they come out of the heart. And out of the heart is where all these evils come from, the evils that we really ought to be concerned with, most of all. Because, while you can wash your hands every single day, you don't necessarily every single day have an opportunity to avoid murdering someone. You know what I mean? But the things that lead to a point of where, like, you're deciding, shall I do murder or not? There's a lot that gets you there. And what Jesus is saying is everything that gets you to murder is also sin. You know what I mean? And it's pretty simple and straightforward. Everything that gets you to murder, your hatred, your envy, your strife, your even the smaller things like I forgot the word I usually like to use. Name calling your brother, degrading or demeaning, diminishing the human value of another person, dehumanizing, those kind of things are on the road. You know, I mean, when you look at a person as less human than yourself, or treat them in a way you wouldn't want to be treated yourself, you are like subtly preparing them for murder. You know, and just like when a man lusts after a woman, he's subtly preparing for adultery. He may never get there, but that's not the point. It's still sinful. I'm just saying, even if you never get to the physical act, it's sinful. And because it's going on in your heart, and that is enough of an issue. Because things that are in the heart have a way of coming out. And the heart issues are the most important issues that we could address as far as the sinfulness of man in preparation for God's kingdom. We want to enter into God's kingdom. We want to know how to like carry ourselves in God's kingdom or be somewhat experienced in it. Even in a world of temptation, even in a body, you know, I mean, that is more prone to sin, say, than the glorified body we shall yet receive. But, you know, if you hadn't lived in this body, you wouldn't really be the same person receiving that body. You know what I mean? I mean, I suppose God could construct an imaginary experience you would have that wasn't real. But who's to say this experience isn't the equivalent of that ultimately? I mean, you know, when things are past, I mean, like my childhood past, I'm pretty sure it really happened, but it's like a dream. Did it really happen? Well, sure, I believe it really happened. You know, I was there. But like I remember precious little about it. Well, I remember actually quite a bit. But compared to all the things that happened. Okay, so next verse. And when the Pharisees, you fools, did not he that made that which is without make that which is within also? Doesn't your maker care as much about you? He made the outside and the inside. You don't think he cares about both? You don't think he cares about your outward expression of righteousness? And the thing is, it's easy as Christians look and say, oh, the Pharisees, they're washing hands. We do the same thing. We do the same thing. Everyone does it. You know, we may clean the outside. I mean, I'm not up here constantly telling you. I mean, I think I'm somewhat candid about my own struggles. I mean, I've talked about them a number of times. So, I mean, it's not always like every day necessarily. But I talk about these things. It's like I've never been shy about it. But in general, you don't wear it on your sleeve. I mean, you clean yourself up for public display. So metaphorically speaking, I don't mean just like, you know, like profanity is not, my lips aren't free from profanity sometimes, you know? Sometimes I get a bit expressive. My wife has to chide me, you know, right? There we go. We're easy. Sometimes I shouldn't do that, right? But you can bet if someone's my student and they come around me, I won't use any profane language. Though people say, well, Paul, I've seen you use it in your Bible studies. You know, but I'm not against, because I do think profanity it's different than blasphemy or taking the Lord's name in vain. It is a fairly minor thing. And using profane words if I were just to start analyzing something, like some people call, I feel silly saying things like, it does feel a little silly saying things like poop or something like that. You know, I mean, though I just said something very profane. It's just as profane. It's just the more sanitized, childish word. It's just profane in a childish way. You say poop around a bunch of kids, they start giggling because they know it's profane. It's their version of profane. Just like adults giggle as comedians sit up there using all kinds of profanity. Right? But I'm going to clean up my act. Right? Because it's kind of an act, isn't it? It's kind of hypocritical. He's going to talk about. It's hypocrisy. Putting on an act for everybody. You know? And, you know, sometimes it's not so much an act as just respect of people. Like, I don't use it constantly or anything like that. I'm just saying it's like the amount of profanity I use in my life is less than zero. Okay? I'm not saying I'm a big foul-mouthed, awful person or whatever. I mean, I think people with foul mouths aren't necessarily awful. Depends on how you use it. You know what I mean? Because there's some mild profanity that is sort of like, possibly within the realm of conscience, and also not particularly onerous, meaning harmful, because it's not like, it's not like when you're using profanity directed at another human being, or something like that. Or like the difference between using directing profane language at someone as a way of degrading them versus using it as a sort of sentence enhancer, where it is, sometimes you see people who use a lot of profane language, and it's mostly just sentence enhancers. It's not actually directed at anyone or anything. It's just they talk that way. They're very profane people. It's very common things. Anyways, we all clean up our act a little bit. You know what I mean? I know everyone I've ever known is probably more sinful than I realize. Because in public, they're not. Like I said, I've been very amused at times when people have apologized to me for using profanity in my presence. My ears are singed. Because he said, I don't want to say naughty word or bad word, just, I've explained many times the difference between profanity, swearing, and cursing. 3 different things. Curses involve actual curses. We don't really, damn it, that's a curse. But you have to, what are you cursing exactly? You probably shouldn't curse at all. And then there's, but the words are fine. I curse thee. No one really says that. And of course, swearing is taking the Lord's name into things. Like, I swear by God, I will do this. And, that's swearing. Oh, God. And that's all swearing. And then, of course, or they used to, in the books, they used to swear, and when they would make oaths, the pirates say, by thunder. But you can bet they didn't say by thunder for real. They were saying, in the pirates were going, da-da-da, by thunder. That was the sanitized version of what they said. Their salty language was a little, I always thought it took me years as a kid. I remember reading Treasure Island and stuff, and the pirate cursing seemed pretty mild. I was like, oh, using all kinds of salty oaths. The only reason I'm using that as a good example of the way sometimes people clean up their act. You don't go to church talking like that. And it's you don't, right? You respect the church. If you have a problem with profanity, you leave it home, right? Or you leave it someplace else. Maybe it's just a work thing. For me, it was like I would work around guys who use profanity, and you feel weird not peppering it in because they notice. And there's a lot of peer pressure. It's not good to go along with peer pressure, but it's understandable, like sometimes where it comes from. But we should make all endeavors to clean up our language, not just in public, but at all times. All right? It's actually a very mild sin, right? It is. It's a very mild matter, that kind of, which potty words you use. But it's a good example of the way we clean up our act in public. Like I go to places where I'm in public with all just hundreds of men, like wrestling tournaments and stuff. And a lot of them have problems with things like pornography, right? But you never guess it, right? Because outwardly, they're all clean and shaved. They don't all come there looking like, like a quintessential scumbag, unshaven. Oh, no, they're unshaven. That's right. Nobody shaves anymore. I started shaving just because I realized beards were in fashion. But everyone's wearing, but I mean, they didn't look like 5 o'clock shadow and scummy and dirty and maybe smelly. The stereotypes one might associate with a creepy person. They don't look like creepy people. Maybe they're not, but they have issues. They have problems with lust, anger, whatever. They may keep their anger, the men there who abuse their wives or children, or who are abused by their wives or children. That happens too. Actually, it's just as frequent. You know why? Because human beings are pretty much equally nasty all the way around. It's just when a man abuses a woman, it's usually more disastrous as far as the results because of the difference in strength. But women hit men actually more frequently than men hit women, from what I understand statistically. It's just that it's not as big a deal. I mean, it's a big deal, but I mean, it's not as likely to cause harm, especially if she doesn't use any weapons. Right? So, anyways, there's all this sin bubbling under the surface and people cover it up. It's always going on. But on the other hand, I don't see people who are like holy rollers either, right? And that's where the difference is. Like if I come in, like imagine if I walk around, I mean, I do see a little bit of it. You know, I could put on a big Jesus shirt. You know, I like to wear plain shirts. I almost, I don't mind a small, hard to see logo of the company that made the shirt, especially if I like the shirt. I don't mind their logo being on it, but I generally like my shirts plain, without logo or motto. And I have a couple of shirts I like that have like birds on them because I've always liked birds, owls, eagles, hawks, things like that. I find I've always liked them as animals, attracted to birds. And so I have a couple bird shirts, but for the most part, I have plain shirts. Right? But I could put a Jesus shirt on, Lord's Gym, where he's where he's doing a push-up with a cross on his back, which I always thought looked cool, but it was a little silly, right? A little silly. You can get a lot more silly than that. Man, my head's starting to hurt weirdly. I need some coffee. I mean, we could get a lot sillier than that, couldn't we? Okay. Anyways, so the Pharisees had a tendency to make shows of righteousness and covering up the sinful things that are going on inside. People often do that second part. We cover up our sins. No, people are, the Bible calls us to confess our sins. It's good to confess. I've confessed my sins to people. I confessed just now. I mean, maybe I didn't seem remorseful enough, and I guess maybe I take it too lightly. Maybe that's another sin of mine. I take it too lightly. And I should have a little more remorse, like, yeah, you gotta, because the tongue is very difficult to control, but if you can control it, you can control everything. So it's a great thing to have control of, which I would like to have. Anyways, so I certainly am not, I think it's good to admit things that we struggle with or that are, I guess the reason I take it lightly because I've had so many more worse things to struggle with in my life. Or drugs, alcohol, immorality, all these other struggles that I've overcome, it gets harder to really take seriously your minor sins. Though Jesus, I think he calls us to take everything seriously to the ultimate perfection. We don't want to get all slack now. You know what I mean? Like having come so far, you don't want to just like, well, the rest is no big deal. And now I'm good enough. Because if I had started off as decent as I am now, I don't want to say good, let's say decent. If I had started off at 20 the way I am at 46, I would probably have been less inclined to change. You know what I mean? I would have thought, oh, it's no big deal. I would have been in more danger of hypocrisy as far as in the sense of thinking I was really holy and then acting like it. Acting like you think you're holy. He says in verse 41, but rather give alms of such things as you have, and behold, all things are clean unto you. What he's saying is that, the things you're worried about, the general uncleanness of the world, can be covered up with good works. And it's like, when Jesus talked about, I think of Cornelius the centurion from the book of Acts. He was the Gentile whom God used to show Peter the idea that Gentiles were not unclean, and that he should not regard any man as unclean. In fact, Peter says that because Peter had this vision of all these animals being let down and this sheep, these unclean animals, and the voice of God says, eat this. Eat, rise, take, kill, eat. And he says, Lord, I've never eaten unclean things. And then he does it, what I have cleansed, don't you call unclean. And Peter, and people will point out that this wasn't really about food, though I do think the principle is generally the same. That because the way food makes you unclean in the Old Testament. Well, let me get to this first. So he brings the sheet up and down, and then he goes to the house of Cornelius, and he says, God has shown me that, out of every nation, those who fear God and do righteousness, God honors them and he respects them, and God is whatever. But the point is, the fact that he's a Gentile, the fact that he eats unclean food, the fact that he doesn't follow Jewish customs of cleanliness and of sanctification, of outward, the way the garments they wear. He does a lot of things that, like, you're not one of us. You're not one of the Jews. You're not sanctified, cleansed, special. Yet God looks on you and your righteousness and your fear of God, which implies also other things such as good deeds, such as giving of your, like, I have 8 kids. I don't give much money to anybody except my own, to support my own family, because that's the measure of it, right? But I have some time, so I give every day of what I have. You know what I mean? It's like I give of what I have. We all give of what we have. You know what I mean? If you have money, you give of money to whatever purposes is the Lord leads you to do. But by doing so, it's sort of like the general uncleanness of the world that, like, a Gentile like Cornelius might partake of without knowing. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't wear the right clothes. He eats pork. All these, he does things that are Old Testament unclean. But what it's saying is, like, for having the inside made right and for doing the right thing and seeking the righteousness of God and doing it in your life, all those minor things that people fret about, like, and there's the Hebrew roots movement where they actually are Christians who try to follow the old covenant, which is wrong, wrong, wrong. You should be trying to follow what Jesus says here. Hey, you know what? Give alms of all such things as you have. Such things, he says, of such things as you have. And what's alms mean? Alms for the poor? Alms? Let's look it up in the... first I can do that, and that way I seem like I know what I'm doing. Alms. What are alms? I think I know what they are, and by context we kind of know what they are. Give alms. We're going to be giving things. Of what? Of what things you have. It's not necessarily money. It could be your time, your attention, love. Some people need love. Some people aren't loved in this world and sure could use some love. Doesn't have to be like love, but I mean love in the form of kindness, thoughtfulness. Alms, elemonosune, or I butchered that badly. And let's see. See, I could try to pronounce that, but why would I do that to myself? I've got this phonetic spelling. Oh boy, I love it. Ella a mosune, and I can't put that all into one sentence or one. I can't. That's not sounds my mouth is used to making altogether. But Ella a mosume, whatever. Almsgiving, charity, concrete, mercy, mercy, eleos. Where's the Strong's definition? From eleos, which means compassionateness. As exercise towards the poor, beneficence. Beneficence. That makes me think of maleficence, which is the opposite. Benefaction, alms. It means your compassionate it means your show of compassion. It's the concrete, like when compassion goes from the heart to reality. I mean, that's what alms are. It's your compassionate acts. It's not compassion of mind. It's compassion of deeds. Deeds done out of compassion. That's what alms are. Compassion for the poor. Alms for the poor, I don't know if it makes me think of the word like balm, or I almost would like to explore the word alm in English. I'm not going to do it here because it's silly. It's not necessary. But it's like, I'm just curious because I don't know any word like it or any word related to it in my mind. Like a verb or something like that. If you show compassion, God is gracious and merciful to the compassionate. You think he's going to like hold your feet to the fire over a washing issue when you forgave the debt of others that owed you money, or you forgave the sins of others that sinned against you, or you did some other compassionate act to someone in need, and he saw your compassion and your mercy, and then he's going to be like, well, you know what I mean? Those sins, those, eating pork, those little minor things are the, you know what I mean? That's like the frosting that's going to go over someone's condemnation on more general terms. But God is compassionate and will waive off any such infractions based on you being compassionate, because that's what he really cares about. Especially for Gentiles, Jews may feel some obligation to adhere to their law, and I do not grudge them that. That is their heritage and all that, but it's not mine. I'm not going to become a Jew now either. I come from a long line of Gentiles. From the pagans in the north, and from the Romans. I guess they're pagans too, obviously, but I come from not from the Jewish people. And I know some people think Anglo-Israelite and all that stuff. I don't buy it. And I certainly used to think that, but I reject that. I reject that sort of thought. I'm also part English and all that stuff, but that's all not. Those are classic Gentile people, always considered Gentile. And even for those of you who say like, well, I trace my ancestry back to Israel through the migrating tribes and all that. That's like 2,500 years ago. Really? You think you're, I'm probably related to Abraham in some, I don't know. It's like, that was so long ago, and Abraham had a lot of descendants besides the tribes of Israel. And plus, or I'm descended from one of his ancestors, potentially. We all go back at some point. It's really just, it's not and also remember, according to the Old Covenant, it's not the natural children that are the inheritors, because Esau was a natural child of Jacob, or of Isaac, but he didn't inherit the promise. So was Ishmael a child of Abraham. He didn't inherit the promise. But the ones who receive the promise are the ones who count as the seed. Isaac, Jacob. Not just because, and the tribes of Israel that were cast off from God, or by God, from their land. Their descendants who grew up among the heathen are not children of promise. The ones who are the children of the promise are the ones whom God took back to Israel and restored to their land. The tribes of Judah and also the remnant of Israel that returned. They're the children of promise. They still got the promises. You're not a child of promise if you don't got promises. If you picked them up through Jesus, then you're not a Jew. I don't care what you think your ancestry was. Anyways, that's sidetrack. Don't want to get down that track. Well, it has to do with cleanness and uncleanness, and Gentiles were regarded as unclean. But woe to you, Pharisees, for you tithe mint and rue and all manner of herbs, and pass over judgment and the love of God. These ought ye to have done, and not to leave the other undone. On my website, which I constantly promote every day, right, oraclesofgod.org, I have a study, which I think is an important study. Otherwise, obviously, I wouldn't have done it. I don't know. Maybe some studies aren't so important that I've done, I guess. I don't assume everything I do is important. That's true. But I was fairly early. Where we go? Number 11. I don't think I ever finished the video for this. It's still on my computer. It's still in process. I started working on the video probably 2 years ago. At least 2 years ago, because I was working on it before I even started doing live streaming, which was a year and a half ago. The love of God. Right there. The hour and 48 minute study. A very good study. And in fact, did I do a study called The Judgment of God? I sure should have. Right? Well, judging. There's a little bit of judging. What, is this study we look at the way? Oh, that's a little different. It was in a very specific context. And that's an old picture. Whatever. But the love of God. I just recommend that study because I can't recommend a video. And all my studies, of course, are free. And those studies are a little different than these. They are edited. So they are very compact, very dense. And you may find that, you enjoy that. I confess, from time to time, I have listened to them and found that I like them. A lot of those single subject studies. Like, I'm glad of the work I did. I'm not one of those people who will never go back and listen to anything I do. It's like, I think it's good for you to listen to what you say. Sometimes it makes me uncomfortable. When I listen to the oldest Bible studies, like my oldest ones on my website, it's a little bit cringy for me, right? Not quite comfortable yet. So, the most important thing is judgment, the love of God. Notice he includes judgment, though. This thing I always say is like, we are called to judgment. It means to use judgment. People often say, Jesus said, judge not. But he didn't say judge not. He said, judge not that you be not judged. For with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged. Meaning, the judgment, it's a caution about judging. Whatever judgment you pass on other people will be the standard under which you are going to be judged. You will be held to the same standard. Because sometimes people are very judgmental about people because of, let's say, society. You know what I mean? Like, let's say someone has a problem with, I don't want to use the same subject over and over again. Let's say someone has, well, let's say someone uses a piece of profanity. And so, did you hear what they said? Profanity. You know what I mean? And so they freak out about the profanity. And they use profanity. You know what I mean? They use profanity themselves. But not only did they not want you to think they use profanity, you know what I mean? Not only did they just want to just not use profanity around people, so as not, out of respect maybe. I mean, because the thing is, you could just do it out of respect, right? A lot of times that's all it is. I go to church. I respect church. I'm not going to start using profane words there. It's very unlikely. It's most likely like maybe when I'm working on my car. You know what I mean? It has a way of bringing out, you get a particularly tough nut and you can't get it off, and it becomes frustrating. I remember my dad. I remember my mechanic friend, and I was admired because he was funny. Because he'd be like, "God bless it." I remember my dad saying "God bless it," but he would say it in a way that sounded like a curse. Would be, "God bless it, nut, but God bless it." And I never heard a man make a blessing sound more like a curse. But he did. It sounded like it, but he'd say, "God bless it." Oh, bless their hearts. You know what I mean? Because in a sense, even if you don't use profanity, if you just go da, 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 and just make noises, which I tried for a while, it's essentially the same thing. You're still getting frustrated and angry. Can't deny it. It's the base problem is not even the profanity, right? It's just, I'm not being patient. You know what I mean? Because patience is going to bring I don't know, sometimes a little bit of fury has brought a few nuts off, I got to say. But a lot of times, my fury has broken ineffective on the banks of the rocks of some, I'm getting too metaphorical. Basically, in frustration at trying to did no good at all. And surely patience would always pay off anyways if you just keep at it and use a little more force. And I don't need to get angry to use more force. Anyways, so we are called, sometimes people will be judgmental to cover up, in a sense, like they do it, they're more judgmental because they're also guilty. And they become, it's almost a form of defensiveness. Like a cliche about a guy who complains about women's clothing is that he's got a problem with it. I mean, if he complains too loudly, sometimes it's like, yeah, I got a problem with it, and when someone's bringing it in your face, it's kind of like rude. You know what I mean? And it's like, if a guy goes around wearing like really tight cut muscle shirts, you know what I mean, like that, and or dress in leather, like you can see a guy dressing up a certain way. You just think the people generally are gonna think like, gosh, he's kind of a, I don't know. In men, it's usually unacceptable, so you don't see it a lot. A guy dressing up like I guess like a male stripper or something like trying to put on I'm a sexy guy kind of outfit. And generally, people, when they see that, they're like, this is a bit much. Women get away with it more, though at some point, everyone knows. Everyone's like, oh, come on, lady. Just take it easy. In fact, sometimes it's almost more pitiful than anything. But like sometimes in general, like if it's something lesser and someone complains too much, people often think, oh, he's got it's you have a problem. Like someone once said something about my daughter, and I was like, I don't know, man. I don't think anyone's going to think anything, and I never thought anything until you started talking. And now you're making me think you do have a problem. And so I'm going to go get that extra large t-shirt so she can wrestle in it, and you don't have to, and it prevents your lust from being inflamed. I mean, I don't, he doesn't say that, but it sort of gives you the feeling. It's like, okay, your judgmental attitude towards it makes me think there is something up. And maybe there isn't. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe they're just overly cautious. I don't know what drives someone's over caution. Fear in public, because people are judgmental. And that's the thing, is like, maybe the guy's afraid he's going to get accused of something. I don't know how. In that situation, it's like basically it's like a referee, because my daughter wrestles just like my sons wrestle, right? And they wear a singlet, which is like the most conservative one-piece bathing suit you could ever think of. You know what I mean? Other than shorts, wearing like a pair of swimming trunk shorts. It's like the most conservative bathing suit you could think of. I mean, it's not that conservative. I could think of more conservative ones, like with baggy shorts and maybe like a t-shirt top, right? It's a singlet. But it's not revealing other than contour, right? But that's not what the guy's telling me. You know what I mean? And I was sort of like, I'm like, yeah, I'll get her little brother to give her a shirt so she can cover up better. But I never thought it was necessary. And I don't really think it was. And he wasn't saying, could she put a pair of shorts on? Or, you know what I mean? Like, or something. Point is, the judgment you judge against people is kind of the judgment you're judged on. If I was going to judge him as being some sort of baddie for doing his job, refereeing a match that involved, it seemed to me like he had a problem like just girls being in wrestling. Like it was some sort of like thing like that. Like it was like they need to wear special something or other because he's afraid. He told me he was afraid of being accused of something pedophilic. And I thought, this is silly. You know what I mean? Like, I never would think that. Any more than if you were at the beach and children were present. It's like, what are you going to do? It's ridiculous. At some point, things get just off into crazy land. All right, so we don't want to judge in such a way as we are judging ourselves, right? But the thing is, here's another thing, though. We are going to be judged. You are going to judge. We are all going to stand at the judgment seat of Christ. We're going to be judged. And when he said about judge not that you be not judged, doesn't mean that you get off the hook from judgment if you don't judge. You'll be judged for that. He's judging them for passing over judgment. Judgment like a man divorces his wife so he can marry someone younger. And John the Baptist and Jesus say, that's adultery. That's judgment. That's judgment. And you know what? If you were to do the same thing, meaning if you were to divorce your wife to go be with a younger woman, you would also be, if you judge that that's adultery, which it is, and here's the thing, whether you judge it or not, that's the judgment of God, and you will answer for it. No man escapes the judgment of God. What you have to be careful of is the judgment that is more of the conscience and of like where you don't, like where I'm judging someone's motives. Like if that referee, like who I thought was being a little weird, like if he never said nothing, like if every referee who was reffing my daughter, I took some sort of hostile thinking, like they're probably thinking something unclean or something inappropriate. You know what I mean? Like to me, it's like, I know people are perverse. There are people who are perverse who would go to a sport, they at a sporting event, they'd find some reason to be perverse. They find it at the grocery store. They find it at the shopping mall. There's no place where people aren't thinking perverse thoughts, right? But for me to go in and assume someone is having it, he must be thinking a perverse thought. You know what I mean? That's not proper judgment. I mean, I have no insight on that. Just like when the Pharisee judges Jesus, he walks in, he doesn't wash. This man can't be the Messiah. He didn't wash his hands properly. That's the same thing. They're judging people based on things, that are more conscious or less concrete. The real sins that God has said are sinful. It's not me judging. If I were to say something like, same-sex marriage is not marriage and it's a sin. It's not marriage and it's a sin, right? I'm not judging anybody. That's merely the truth, okay? And it's like, does it condemn them? Do I condemn them? I don't condemn anybody. The truth is what condemns. And you can disagree. People in this world do. They don't say it's beautiful. It's like, but it's wrong. It's manifestly wrong. It's completely biologically wrong. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that they don't do what they do by nature, that they aren't have some sort of something driving them, that like they just choose to be like, why do they do that? I don't believe in that. Like people do these things because of impulses that are deep, like all sin. It's not something you just like wake up and say like, I think I'm going to have a problem with food. You know what I mean? Like nobody who has a problem with food just woke up one day and decided to be that way. Any more than they can just wake up and decide, I'm just not going to be that way. I mean, it can seem like that. You know what I mean? Like one day I decided to stop, I start doing certain things, but it's like start exercising, stop eating badly or whatever, stop drinking, stop using drugs. It may seem like one day I decided to do that, but that's not how it happened. There was a lot of things that led up to that. So they tithe mint and rue and all manner of herbs. Let's make sure we finish out this verse. The tithe means the tenth. I mean, it was like the temple tax of the Old Testament. Pastors try to get Christians to pay tithe. And you should not pay tithe. And they like to because they're afraid people won't give. And a lot of people won't. People don't give to ministries. It's just the way it is. If you want people to give, you've got to really push it. That's why there's so little support for this ministry, because I do not push. In fact, I actively encourage people not to give because I don't want whatever, because of that's a good thing. All right, let's just say that. Because I don't want to go beyond that, because it starts getting into like, I start feeling like I'm pressuring one way or the other. I don't want to pressure one way or the other at all, because I'm confident. I want people, because sometimes it's like some people, it's like they have families, they have needs, they have maybe a very tight budget, and they don't need to, on top of the taxes already paying, have to take 10% out for church, or least of all me. You know what I mean? So the tithe is like something that's passed away with the old covenant, as far as I'm concerned. Now, and also it's insufficient. If you can give more to whatever of your to God, don't think in terms of to any ministry, especially anyone in particular, but like if you can, you know what I mean, like if I could give more than 10% of my time or whatever to God, I should give 20, 30, 40. We should give God our all. You know, like when Jesus commended the widow who cast in her mites, her 2 mites, he said, she has cast in all her living. She gave all she had. We are called to give all our have, to all we have, to offer our bodies as living sacrifices to God. You know what I mean? Your whole being. God doesn't want your tenth. He wants everything. He wants your whole being. He wants you to give all you have into every bit, you know, your money, your children, your life. All those things are committed to his service. And in some ways, you know, I mean, it's like, and of course, yes, your family has to be supported as part of it. It's they that plow, you know, you can't muzzle the ox that plows the corn. You can't like starve yourself to death or your family to death in service to God. But the point is, it is all yielded up. You know what I mean? Like, I don't claim it for my own, but it all belongs to him. You know what I mean? God gave it to me, and God can take it away from me, and it all belongs to him anyways, and I, even myself, belong to him. Now, they tithe the mint, and I mean, the smallest tithe, they tithe everything, even their herbs. You know, you're supposed to tithe, pay the 10th of all the increase of your cattle, in the increase of your tomatoes or whatever. I don't think they hit tomato. Of your vegetable crops, you know, of your tithe of your wheat, tithe of this. And they would tithe even their mint and their cumin, you know, their mint and their rue, whatever rue is. I don't know what rue is, and I'm not going to look it up. Oh, I'm tempted to look it up. I'm tempted, but I'm not going to look it up. It's another herb. If I looked it up, would we even, you know, oh, it's actually rosemary. Oh, it's actually this or that. It's some common herb. And Passover judgment and the love of God. This point is that there are some really critical issues to be taken care of. Judgment. You got to judge. You have to have good judgment. You got to judge right things from wrong things. You have to know. We have to read the Bible and be able to pick out right from wrong. Because and go on we have to be able to study the Bible and then go out in our lives and be confronted with new situations that aren't necessarily laid out in detail in the scriptures, what you should do, and have enough sense of right and wrong and the will of God and the love of God to do right, to discern right from wrong, and also to show the love of God has to do with showing mercy when appropriate. Mercy. But like I said, whatever you will bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. There's also, if you are walking with God, there is mercy, and there is also when you say you're not forgiven. And so that's, I think, controversial. But that's what that means. Whatever you bind, you mean you bind someone, you say bind him hand and foot. Like when Paul said, whom I have delivered unto Satan. That's not forgiveness. You know what I mean? And because you got to understand, forgiveness is given to those who want it. People, to the defiant, to those who defy God and who refuse. It doesn't mean you have to take it like, I always think forgiving on a personal level, like the personal affront to oneself. You forgive. You let go of anger. You let go of rage, revenge, all the emotional, you know what I mean, attachments, the personal affront that you take from a sin against you, you let go. You know what I mean? You do not hang on to those things. You do not seek revenge. But someone who does not desire forgiveness, you don't like go and then try to give it to them. As far as like, I want you to know I forgive you. It's almost in a way, I don't know. I mean, you could try that. I certainly would say yes, but they throw it back in your face. What if they throw it back in your face? You let them be not forgiven. You know that they're not forgiven. God doesn't forgive them. And they're not forgiven. I'm not going to tell them, oh, you're forgiven for this, when they have an unrepentant attitude, I'm not going to forgive someone who doesn't believe what they do is sin. I'm not going to have a grudge or you know what I mean, like soil myself. And I am ready to to tell them you are forgiven. People who are sorry for their sins, who repent of their sins, who mean they at least want to change. I don't care if you actually change. I don't. I mean, I do care. I want you to change. But I'm not going to, some people think like you have to actually change your ways. It's like, you know what? Yeah, I'm sure that's exactly how it went with you, didn't it? And you, up to the point where you decided I'm good enough and you stop trying to change. It's like, I don't use profanity. I don't commit adultery. You know, but I'm an insufferable and loutish person. You know what I mean? I'm a boorish, loutish, insufferable, unmerciful, implacable person in the midst of the church, causing misery and destruction everywhere I go. You know what I mean? Like there's so much still wrong with them that they're blind to because they just looked at how clean they are outwardly. And what Jesus is saying is, you ought to have done judgment. And well, I like when he says in Matthew, he says, judgment, weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. He doesn't include faith here, judgment and the love of God. We didn't go into a great deal in the love of God, and we're well out of time. The love of God is such a big subject, and I'm not going to crack it open here. I did show that study, but that study is not so much about what I would use here about the love of God, but it is an important thing that God's love is, remember, love is what does good, not what feels good. God's love wants to do good to people, to free them from their sins, to set them on the right path, to bring them to righteousness, to bring them to faith. You know what I mean? Not to, you know, because I believe in tough love, but tough love, and I practice it on some people who are unrepentant especially, a bit of tough love, especially after so many times. You know what I mean? How many times a day shall I forgive my brother if he sinned against me? It's hundreds of times, right? But Jesus said, if he say, I repent, someone who is just consistently unrepentant, God requires repentance. He does. He requires us to have an attitude that we recognize the evil we do. And we have to recognize we've done bad. I'm sorry, I've done wrong. Someone who's willing to at least just say, I'm sorry, I've done wrong. Now, I'm sorry you feel that way, by the way. Sorry you feel that way. That's not sorry. That's not repentance for sure. That may be sorry. That is sorry, right? I'm sorry you feel that way. That's judging you. Right? I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry you're such a poor judge of right and wrong, because what I did was right, and you're wrong. I'm sorry you have these judgmental feelings. And you know what? It could be right. Sometimes that's the case. I'm sorry you feel that way. You've misjudged me. That can happen too. You ought to notice he says, do the big things, but don't forget about the details. Details are important. Don't leave the other undone, but do the other first. It's like I said, if I had started off as far along the path I am now when I was 20, if I was 20 and I'm like I am today, I might have thought like, I'm fine. I'm fine. I would have maybe become self-righteous and hypocritical. Or I would pray the Lord wouldn't leave me that way. But what I'm saying, I could see that tendency if I hadn't come all the way I did. It has a way of humbling you, you know, to experience like what, just how ungreat a person you really are. To experience it, to feel it. So anyways, having come so long teaches you a lot. And I forgot why I brought that up, and that's all right. Because you might leave the other undone. That's the whole point. It's like you come so far, you get the big sins out of your life. Don't neglect to continue on to perfection, to keep reaching up for perfection. I remember there was this graph. I was grading some math, some algebra yesterday, and there's a graph of a function of like the depth of field in a lens. And early on, you know, there was a big slope, like a major change. But then it was almost flat. The farther and farther you got away, it almost becomes flat. It's not flat, but the changes become smaller and smaller. And that's the way it is with the walk. Our walk is oftentimes in the beginning, we have a lot of big changes in our lives. Even for me, just studying the Bible all the time was a huge change in my life. Like when I appeared for the first time at 20, or when I was 19, I came back from the university and I went to community college. And the Christian kids who were from my high school who met me, they were astonished at the changes. Even though I wasn't much improved morally. I was somewhat improved morally, I will say. But I wasn't much improved morally. I was still pretty much the same person in my own eyes. But I hadn't been Mr. studying the Bible 6 hours a day person. You know what I mean? I hadn't been that person. I hadn't been the, I've got the Bible here and I can rattle off. It was a transformation of a year. So it was like huge changes had taken place. And most people, when they start off their faith, it is like this, big changes. And that's good. Focus on the big important things. But as you continue to walk, don't let the details slide. Do pay attention to details. That's the tithing, the mint. That's not for us. But the equivalence is like, yeah, I know, murder, hatred, disrespect, profanity. The lesser sins become more important. It becomes because it's all you got left to focus on. And we want to arrive perfect in the likeness of Christ. So, anyways, we'll continue in this chapter with verse 43 tomorrow. Thanks for joining me in this study. I look forward to it. I wish it was here right now already.
But woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut up the kingdom of heaven. For you neither go in yourselves, neither suffer ye them that are entering to go in. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye devour widows' houses for a pretense, make long prayer. Therefore ye shall receive the greater damnation. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye compass land and sea.